Greetings from Tokyo, my dear friends. This is Daisuke, and I hope all of you are doing very well today. I was in the middle of doing some note-taking on some of the films that are in the Criterion Collection that are by the director Akira Kurosawa, and some of the films in the Criterion Collection you can see stacked on the table here. When I received a question from a viewer and a friend of mine who I shall leave nameless for now, and his question was very interesting and it got me thinking, and I just wanted to share the question with you and to see if you have any similar kind of experiences. And it's this: Daisuke, have you ever felt burnt out by watching films? Have you ever felt burnt out or exhausted, or have you felt that you're fed up with watching movies? The answer to the question, at least now, where I find myself as of this video, is no, I don't feel burnt out now. In fact, I don't think I think my love of cinema is quite strong now. And I'm very proud of that, and I'm very happy that it's strong. And when I say strong, I mean I still feel the urgency and the need and the hunger to try to understand more about what it is that I enjoy about cinema. However, I should say that there was a period of time, not so long, but maybe about a year or so, where I was actually quite burnt out by cinema. And this was in my maybe mid-20s or so, so after I graduated from university. So let me just explain. So when I was in university, and even before then, I was such a huge fan of cinema. I loved watching movies, renting videotapes and all that. And this is all before DVDs. And then the DVD revolution began in earnest when I was in college, and that was even a greater time. So more access, more things to be able to watch. And then being able to go to the university that I was able to go to afforded me a lot of opportunity to become exposed to a lot of films that I would not have otherwise become exposed to. Learned so much through my experiences there, and it's a time that I don't think I will ever forget. And even to this day, I still remember many of the things that I learned about cinema way back when I was in college, so whatever it was, 20 years ago or so. So yes, so it's a time that I cherish very much even now. But maybe after I graduated and I was trying to figure out what I was going to do with my life, there was a period where I was, I think, feeling very burnt out by cinema. And maybe it was the fact that I was watching so much when I was in university, and then I graduated and I went into the real world, so to speak. And I think there might have been some kind of correlation with my graduation and perhaps not being able to watch as many films that I had ordinarily been able to watch when I was in university. So perhaps I felt a little bit of withdrawal, I'm not sure. But in any event, I did undergo a certain period, about a year, I would say, where suddenly I was very much turned off by cinema, by watching movies, fiction films. And at the time, I remember thinking to myself, and it was a bit of a cinematic crisis, if you will, but I remember thinking to myself, why was I so focused on these stories and these depictions of stories visual depictions of stories that were, for the most part, based on what I was watching. Fictionalized events. They were just made up fiction stories. That was what I was thinking of in my head. And I was thinking, why was I so focused on the fictional world? I should rather focus my energies on the real world, right? I should try to focus my energies on what I was experiencing in my life at the time, trying to establish myself in some way, or trying to find a job or do something like that. Or, in other words, trying to work out the day-to-day issues of, adult living, right? So I think I was undergoing a certain shift in priorities in my life. And I think as part of that, I shifted away from cinema. And I think part of the reasoning that I was thinking to myself was that at least I thought to myself at the time, that cinema was, at least fictional cinema, was just that, fictional cinema. And thus watching it would be, while entertaining, would probably be a waste of my time. I should rather instead focus my time, focus my energy on trying to deal with quote-unquote real-world issues that were directly in connection with whatever it was I was experiencing in my life at the time. And so that was what I was experiencing. And therefore, I decided I didn't want to watch many films at all during that period. And I didn't. And it was, I think, it was kind of a rejection of cinema as far as I was concerned, because, again, I felt at the time that it could only give me so much. Devoting all this time and energy trying to work out the interconnections between character A and character B in this film, that was it. And even though I tried to work it out, it never, at least I felt at the time, it never necessarily led anywhere. You know what I mean? It just ended at the film ending, and then that was it. But then the lights came on, and I had to walk out of the theater, and it was, I was outside, and thus I was back in the real world. And so I thought that, why, if I have to return to the shock of the real world, so to speak, why should I focus my energy on these fictionalized accounts? I should instead focus my energy on trying to basically work out these things that I have to do in my daily life. And so that's what I did. I essentially rejected cinema for about a year. And it was, I think on the one hand, it was, now that I think about it, it was a period where I thought, on the one hand, I think back on it, and I think I did lose a lot of time. In other words, I could have spent that time watching all these movies, but I didn't. And so I decided I didn't want to think about movies. I didn't want to think about cinema. And so I just worked out some other things, and I focused on other things in my life, and which was, I think, very beneficial for me. But cinema, which had been such a big part of my life up to that point, suddenly was out of my life. And that was a purposeful pushing away on my part. And I still remember that very vividly, because I felt, again, that it wasn't giving me what I felt that I needed at that point in my life. But, as I said, this occurred for about a year, maybe a little bit less. But there was a point where I think I was alone in my apartment somewhere, and I was thinking, and I was thinking back on all these films that I had seen, and I was trying to figure out, what was it all for? What was watching all this stuff all for? Why did I spend all this time, for instance, in university, just watching all these films and absorbing them, watching 16 millimeter prints and old laser discs and all that, just trying to watch as much as I can. Why was I focusing so much on that and then all of a sudden not wanting to watch any films, not necessarily finding any joy in watching films anymore during this period later in my life? And I was really thinking about that very hard, and it was actually a bit of a crisis, I would say, in terms of my own cinema love. And I was really thinking about, do I really love cinema? Do I really love it, or is it time for me to move on, so to speak, after this sort of trial separation, if you will? And I was thinking about it long and hard, and oh gosh, it was a very interesting period that I was really debating in my head. Should I return to cinema, or should I forever reject it and think about other things? I do remember that. Yeah, it was quite. I mean, right? It's cinema, right? It's something that we enjoy and stuff. So it's not like if I reject cinema, it's the end of the world. As we know it. Of course, I realized that, but it had been such a key thing in my life up to then. So I was thinking, do I really want to shed this from me and move on? So I really thought about that long and hard, and for the longest time, I couldn't come up with a solution. I couldn't come up with an answer, a response to that question. And I thought, if I couldn't come up with a response, then I think that would be the answer. Right? In other words, if I couldn't come up with a response, then that would mean that I would have to basically reject cinema and abandon it and completely leave it behind, break up with it, so to speak. But one day, I think it dawned on me. It dawned on me, and it was suddenly very clear that cinema was something very special. And gosh, it was suddenly like it just clicked into place. And it was this, I realized, at least as far as I was concerned, that, right, cinema is, at least fictional cinema, basically that's it. It's the stories of characters that otherwise don't exist. They just exist, air quotes, within the frame. But that's it, right? That's all that happens. And then when the film is over and the lights go on and the curtain closes, that's it. That's done. So it's not like it's a real existence. But I thought, why should it have to be a real thing? Why should it have to be real? There's nothing that says that something has to be real in order for it to have an effect on you. As long as one realizes the issue of reality and fiction, and the idea that we can use fiction in order to better our lives, or to find joy, or to learn about ourselves. And then that got me thinking more, right? Because it's this idea of an idea, right? It's this idea of an idea, right? Which is, if you take an idea that has already been established from this person, and you take another idea that's been established by another person, and you then combine them and try to create something new, that is creation by synthesis. I mean, it's a very key principle of scientific discovery and the idea of human endeavor all throughout the history of humankind. So, right? I mean, all you have to do is think about, as an example through cinema, the apes in 2001. Taking an idea and then using it to develop into something that will further their needs going forward. And so I thought, that's essentially what cinema is it not? You're taking these ideas that have already been established, combining them in some way that one, the filmmaker, feels is important, and then creating something new. So this is this idea of synthesis and the idea of human endeavor yielding creation, or the creative effort. And therefore, I thought, well, if we see this kind of human endeavor being implemented throughout many facets of humankind and society, such that we see medical advancements here, we see scientific advancements there, we see certain advancements in geopolitical theory, we see certain breakthroughs that have been made, etc., then, and if that leads to a further development and understanding of human nature, in whatever capacity that is, whether it's the idea of knowledge being expanded or technology leading to some breakthrough that will hopefully benefit society at large, then that kind of understanding or rubric, when applied to the act of creation, is very powerful. And if we think cinema is an example of this act of creation by a human being, or by a number of human beings, then I think that the act of cinema, or creation within the realm of cinema, is truly a remarkable feat. It therefore becomes an example of the creative genius of human endeavor. And if that's the case, then it's something that I think I can hang my hat on, so to speak. In other words, it becomes something that I can start to believe in again, as an example of the creative endeavors of humanity. I mean, I don't mean to sound very lofty, but that's what I was thinking at the time. It was something where films therefore became something that were the results of human effort. And in that sense, I suddenly discovered that this was yet another way for me to fall in love with cinema again. And I therefore then became so much in love. I fell back in love with cinema, let me put it that way. And I was so happy. It was like I was reuniting with a long lost love, so to speak. Or it was like I just saved a relationship from breaking up. You know, it was like we were about to break up, and then suddenly I stopped and I realized that she was the one that I loved all the time. And so I turned around and I ran back to try to tell her that before she just, I don't know, got on a train and rode off, and I never saw her again. But I was able to catch up with her just in time. And so that was it. And then from there, it just exploded. Suddenly, the world was now open, and I became re-immersed in all that was great about cinema, and that just continued for many years since then. And then I, got into my 30s, and it just continued on. And by that time, I was already married, and I was starting my family, and I was settling down in Tokyo. And then now here I am. And so I think that year, when I was in my 20s, was a very important year, because I think being away from cinema allowed me ultimately to realize how much I really was in love with it, and still am. Now, who knows what will happen in the future? Who knows what will happen tomorrow? I could experience burnout tomorrow. I could experience burnout next year. Who knows? Maybe I might decide financially that this endeavor is not worthwhile for me. It doesn't fit my needs. Or maybe I will discover that maybe film doesn't do it for me the way it used to. I always mention that I'm not usually into recent releases. And it's usually because I don't get out into the theater as much as I would like to. But it's also because I think that period many years ago, when I fell out of love with cinema, so to speak, was a period that I considered to be in terms of my cinematic journey, my lost year. And so I feel like I'm trying to make up for that as much as I can. And rather than watch recent films, I'm trying to focus instead on the films that have already been released and have been out for many years now, and just trying to figure out what films I would have watched during that lost year. And so I think that's part of it. And so that's why I tend to focus less on recent releases and more on this sort of thing. It feels like I have to rediscover things, and so I feel like I want to watch films that I've already seen in order to figure out if my viewing of a film that I might have seen prior to the lost year might change now that I'm out of the lost year. You know what I mean? So in other words, if I saw something when I was very young, do I have a different opinion of it now that I'm older and I'm out of the lost year, so to speak? And so that's generally where my cinema love is at the moment. And so that's why I'm re-examining films from the past. You know, now maybe I've mentioned this before, but I'm watching a lot of 60s and 70s Japanese films, which I kind of knew when I was a kid or growing up, but now I'm re-examining them. And the same is true for Kurosawa films and all that. So I think that's part of the reason why I really want to inspect what it was that I had seen many years ago, and see if what I felt at the time still holds up, or maybe things have developed ever since that time. I think in the long run, having the period of time where I was away from cinema, I think was very good for me. But yes, this is to say that I have not always been into cinema. There was a short period of time in my life when I was burnt out, so to speak, but it didn't last long, and I came back, and here I am, some years after the fact, and I'm still as much in love with cinema as I have always been, at the peak, so to speak. So I think that's to say that even for us now, it's not a bad thing at all to say, maybe I should take a break, just step back from it, and see what I can do with my time. Are there other things that I can focus on in my time that might be worthwhile? Who knows? I think a lot of that is up to us, up to you personally, and your own personal journey, and where you are, where you find yourself in your life. There's nothing wrong with leaving cinema. There's nothing that says you have to watch a film every day. You don't have to. You can do whatever it is you want. Films will always be there. They will always be there. And so you can leave, and maybe you decide you never want to come back. That's perfectly fine. But in the event that you do decide that you want to come back, they will always be there. And it's amazing. It's truly amazing. The resilience of cinema, but also the way that time and change in mindset can really turn a film potentially into something so different and so much more than what it had been upon first viewing. And I really felt that way, and it was like, for me, in many ways, a reawakening in so many in so many meanings of the word. I felt like my senses were more alive than ever, and I felt hungrier, if you will, for watching films than ever before. And so that was again, that coincided with me getting married and settling down and starting to have a family, of course. And I think that also had a lot to do with it. Don't get me wrong. I think that actually that had that was probably the primary reason. But a strong secondary reason, I think, is reemerging out of the lost year, and thus being able to continue on with my own cinema journey. And so that was very important to me, and it still is. And so I'm very grateful for that. But anyway, that's just a little story about my own cinema journey and the quote-unquote bumps along the way. But again, I just want to reiterate that there is nothing wrong at all with stepping back and taking a break from cinema, or even maybe leaving it or breaking up with cinema, so to speak. I think it's very healthy. Sometimes breakups, whether they're in relationships or the like, sometimes they're the healthiest things that one can do. And so I think the same is true for one's love with cinema. Sometimes it's a good idea to step back and to spend our time in another way, and perhaps through that we can learn more about ourselves and experience more things that would be very beneficial to our own ways of life and living. So to each his or her own, so to speak. And whatever your choice may be, my friends, I am very much supportive of it, and I think that we all have many things that are happening in our lives, whether they be good things or bad things or something in between. And so we shouldn't feel forced to engage with cinema if we don't feel like it. But if we do feel like it, my goodness, what a potentially fun time it can be. Okay, my friends, that's it. So if you have any thoughts or comments or questions, please feel free to leave them down below. If you want to share your own story, perhaps, of maybe how you maybe fell out of cinema but maybe came back. Do you have some similar episode that you want to share with me? If so, I'd love to hear about your story, and maybe you and I can connect in the YouTube comments and let's have a conversation. So, my friends, anyway, thank you so much for your support as always. I really, really appreciate it. And until we meet again, please, as always, my friends, please be happy and healthy and well. And the same holds true for all of your friends and loved ones. I hope everyone is doing well. And that with that firmly established, I hope you're watching a lot of great films. If you have any films that you've seen that you want to recommend to me, as always, I'd love to hear your great recommendations. So until we meet again, my friends, cheers.